Hey, what's up everyone? Today I want to talk about Resistance 2, released on the PlayStation 3 in 2008. Looking back over the last 11 years, I don't remember the game fondly. It was created with the wrong intent, and Halo was very popular. It was clearly inspired to give Sony an edge over Microsoft in the Halo world. Halo 1, Halo 2, Halo 3, and Halo Reach were all amazing games, and Sony was trying to capitalize on that market. The reason I always had this impression with Resistance 2 was looking at the original game, Resistance Fall of Man. You could tell they're trying to make a game that was based in the 1950s, but had its own unique feel. The art style in Resistance 2 is very reminiscent of Halo. You can even see it in the weapon mechanics in Resistance 2. Rather than being able to carry all the weapons at the same time, this go around you're only allowed to carry 2 weapons at a time. This is a common trope in most modern shooters, and quite frankly, it has no business being in this series, especially considering Resistance 1 and 3. They realized their mistake, they fixed it, Resistance 3 was a better game for it. Why you would tie someone to 2 weapons is ridiculous. If you're trying to create a realistic shooter, maybe, but we're talking about a game where aliens invade and the US is forced to defend. Resistance 2, though, you can tell it received a lot of love, a lot more time, a lot more polish. The game shows it too, and I really enjoyed it at first, but the more I spent time with it, the more I hated it. The game's design is not solid. It's very flashy and very shallow. I much preferred the design in Resistance Fall of Man. It's a much better game in that regard. It feels like a lot of thought and love went into the design and the lore. Resistance 2 does cinematic events really well. I have to say, without a shadow of a doubt, there's a lot of pretty views in the game. One thing I hate is the voice acting. Everyone sounds like they're talking through a goddamn radio. It's lazy, it's poorly executed, and I don't like it.
Eyes forward and stay focused.
Never mind how creepy that face is. Something bugs me about the Chimera model they used in this game. It's not as cool as the original, and it almost seems to move unrealistically. I know for a fictional creature it sounds kind of strange to say it doesn't look fluid. You know, we gotta look at the weapons. Resistance 2 has a lot of good weapons, but a lot of them are rehashes from the first game. The bullseye makes a return, but it's not actually the bullseye. The original bullseye was a lot of fun. In Resistance 2, they murder it. It's no longer the same rifle, and it's not as much fun. For some reason, they took the clip of 70 and they reduced it down to 35. That's pathetic. There's no reason to take a gun like that and change it so much. Of course, the carbine makes a return. I personally really like this iteration of the carbine. It has a higher rate of fire, but everything else is the exact same. Aesthetically, it's the same, the grenade launcher's still there, and it's still just a typical assault rifle, but rather than having around 50 bullets, you only have 30 this time. Why did they make the clip sizes smaller for both rifles? You have a pistol that's introduced. It's the 44 HE Magnum. The Magnum is actually pretty cool. It's very powerful, it can kill lots of enemies in one hit, and it has a secondary ability to blow up the shells after they hit. Given the right situations, the Magnum can actually be a lot of fun. I remember blowing away Grims and then having the secondary fire go off and blow up secondary ones around them. I never did have a bad time with it. Then of course we have the Rossmore 238 combat shotgun. This time it's a clip-fed shotgun rather than having a magazine tube. Other than that, it's the exact same gun. A new weapon that's introduced is the Marksman B. It's a battle rifle pretty much out of Halo 2, with exception to the secondary fire, which is a Nova pulse charge. After you fire it out, it electrocutes enemies around it. That is straight out of Ratchet & Clank, I swear. And then of course, we have one of my favorite rifles, the Auger, but this time it's been upgraded. The Auger scope will actually highlight enemies through walls. They appear to be a teal green, making it much easier to see where they are. I'm also a big fan of the shield they came out with this time. Not only is it larger, it's much easier to utilize in combat situations.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
We also have our typical rocket launcher making a return, the L210 Lark. The primary fire is the exact same. The primary fire is a single rocket that goes out and causes a high amount of damage. Then we also have a secondary fire that's not like the first game. It's pretty cool to hit the secondary fire button and these rockets just spray out and home in on enemies. I really liked it, it was a nice touch. A new weapon they've added into the game is the HVAP Wrath. This is an amazing minigun. I love how the first person view zooms in. I love how Nathan Hale holds it. I love the rate of fire. I love the secondary ability, which is a shield. It just looks cool, and I think they copied it as Predator. We're gonna come back to that, I swear. A weird new addition is the MP47 pulse cannon. The pulse cannon looks very futuristic in design. It also takes 4 seconds to charge, and once charged, it does a lot of damage.
I'm a fire in my laser!
The V7 Spicer fires out saw blades towards your enemies. Not only do they hit the enemies, but they actually bounce around the room after that. And I really like the design, but it's right out of Ratchet & Clank. Another new addition to the game is the XR-13 Belloc. It's basically your typical run-of-the-mill 40mm grenade launcher. However, they put a nice little spin on the secondary fire. It's an incendiary round that causes massive damage. One of my favorite clips is from a cafe where I fire at some steelheads and the one just gets incinerated. Also, I can't forget the grenades they included in Resistance 2. They have the first 3 from the original game. They have the frag grenade, the hedgehog, and of course the airfield grenade, my favorite. But they also had a 4th grenade in the game, the spider grenade. After you throw it, it branches out and burns any of the enemies in the area. It's very high damage, but they also used it for the Marauder boss fight near the end of the game, which I didn't like. It was almost like they were taking the grenade idea and copying and pasting it to a boss fight. One thing I need to mention about the weapons in Resistance 2 is the way that they divvy out the ammo. Let's say you have a weapon, like an auger, and you're going around, you're using it quite heavily, and you kill an enemy that also has an auger. Now you could run over to that weapon, and you could pick up a little bit of ammo they give you. Maybe it's 12, 13 shots. Or you could pick up another weapon nearby, drop the auger that you had, and go over to the new one that dropped. You would get way more ammo in that case. And for me, it broke the economy. I would remember that specifically when I was playing Resistance 2. I would look for weapons I liked, drop the weapon I had, which was the exact same, go over, pick up the new weapon, go over to the one I dropped, and then I'd have full ammo. I didn't like it. That was a bad design choice by Insomniac, and I don't understand why they did it to this day. The very first enemy you see in Resistance 2 is the Goliath, this massive, towering vehicle. I talked about it in my Fall of Man review. The Goliaths are huge, but you know what? They're not this big. There's no way they used the same scaling that they used in Fall of Man for the Goliath that they show in Resistance 2. I get it, they wanted to showpiece, they wanted to show off how powerful the Goliath is, but my goodness, I have a shot of Cartwright from the first game standing beside one of these things. There's no way it's the same scale. Without a doubt, Insomniac messed this up. You know, the second enemy you're introduced to in Resistance 2 is the drone. My goodness, I cannot tell you how much I hate the drones in Resistance 2. Not only are they annoying, they have no health, they fly around, they're annoying to shoot. Just a terrible enemy. I just wish there could have been a different type of enemy. They do bring back the hybrid in this game. The hybrid carries a bullseye rifle, you move around lots, you can be found in every level of the game, and quite frankly, they're a good enemy. I even have an action figure of this thing. I love the design of the Chimera. I love the fins on the back, I love the tubes. God, I love those pants. Furies are Chimera mermen. Whenever you have to deal with water in any level in Resistance 2, there's Furies. Even when the game expects you to go into water, they're present. You have to swim in this one area in Chicago, and you can see a Fury come out of the water and sit on one of the ledges nearby. It is absolutely stress-inducing. They make it so you can't swim anywhere, which I get. From a game design perspective, it makes sense to include the Furies, because that way you can't break linearity and go away from the path. However, it's really annoying in some parts. I remember when you're going through the San Francisco base, you have to hop into the water and then hop out. The first time I went in, I got killed immediately. Really cool new enemy that they brought in to kind of give the game a zombie feel is the Grims. And my goodness gracious, the Grims are plentiful. After Nathan and his crew crash land into a small town, they begin to hatch. And I remember freaking out. I had never thought they would do something this scary. Of course we have the Titan. This time though they're more annoying, I found. They aim for your feet rather than aiming for your torso. That makes it a lot harder to dodge them. I died way too much to them though. Of course, the Steelheads make a return in this game. The design hasn't changed too much, but the weaponry has. I like them. They're still the cool Steelheads I always loved and knew. Another enemy that got introduced in Resistance 2 is the Chameleons. The Chameleons are almost a rip-off of the Predator. Not only are they cloaked, but they run at you at incredible speed, and if you fail to see them, you die instantly. I find that these enemies are cheap, and they didn't even just use it once or twice. You run into them probably upwards of 12 to 13 times throughout the game, and they're not fair. When it's a linear hallway, it's okay, but when they're doing it in like branching paths and they come at you from behind, you are very dead. Of course, the Leapers make a return in Resistance 2. They're the same old enemy, they move around in packs, they attack you. They're a little bit easier to kill this time. I had a weird part where they attack me where they're underwater. Not too sure how that works, but hey, I'll run with it, whatever. One thing I liked about Resistance 2 is they had 4 unique Chimera bosses. The first boss that we run into is the Kraken. He's in the San Francisco area. Really cool design. I think someone spent a very long time working on the design for the Kraken, and it paid off. The second major boss you take on is in the small town level. It's the Mother Spinner. The Mother Spinner fight takes place on top of this defense tower, and it was really cool. It moves around lots, it has lots of varied movement. I really like the design on the Mother Spinner. I thought it was pretty unique. It summons smaller little leapers to fight you. The third boss that we encounter is this one. It's almost like they took a yellow lightning effect and they overlaid it with a bunch of silver pieces, and then it just moves around and shreds people. I didn't like it. I felt it was really generic. The fight itself isn't that much fun. You have to lure it into these like energy shields and they blow it up. The fourth boss that we encounter in Resistance 2 is the Leviathan in Chicago. It's so cool to see this massive towering chimera move around the levels. The sounds that emanate from the Leviathan are powerful. It works well for the trailers, and it's a good showpiece for the level. I liked it. The only thing I didn't like about the Leviathan was that it was a timed event to kill it. When it's moving towards you and you have to blow up a bridge and then it blows off half its face and then you have to shoot a rocket into that hole. I remember feeling let down at that part. In Resistance Fall of Man, they had the Angels. In Resistance 2, we have Daedalus. You know, from a design perspective, he's very similar to an angel, but they gave him a personality, which I do like. It's a bonus. Now we need to look at the plot of Resistance 2. Upon the completion of Resistance Fall of Man, we see Nathan Hale wandering the countryside. We find out that Nathan is being kidnapped by the Special Research Projects Administration, also known as SERPA, which is led by Major Richard Blake. Once in the transport, he is heavily drugged and taken to a base in Iceland. Before they're able to arrive, they are shot down by Chimeran forces. After crash landing, we see a Goliath is moving towards the base. We travel with Blake, defeating various forms of Chimera, and then we reach Daedalus, the main antagonist, as I mentioned earlier. After Daedalus escapes from the Iceland base, we are told by Blake that Nathan Hale is a part of the special project to make human Chimerian hybrid soldiers, creating the Sentinels, a special forces team. 2 years later, we find out that Nathan Hale has been promoted to the rank of lieutenant, and he's been given command of Echo Squad. It consists of Sergeant Ben Warner, Specialist Aaron Hawthorne, and Corporal Joseph Capelli. We find out that the Sentinels that Nathan Hale commands, as well as himself, need to have special inhibitor treatment in order to avoid the Chimerian virus advancing too far. If the Sentinels go unchecked with inhibitor treatment, they will turn into full-blown Chimera.
Once his metabolic rate is raised, the virus will multiply exponentially. He'll be dead in 19 hours, or worse, he'll end up like Shepard.
We do not know that.
As we wander around the base, we find that the situation has become rather dire. Out of the blue, we find a Chimerian Kraken beginning to smash the window for the main area they're in. As Nathan Hale runs, we see that the window is beginning to crack. Nathan Hale then makes his way through the base to the moon pool. Nathan has one job: he needs to close the moon pool before any forces can come through. Luckily, they manage to close it just in time. What's that sound?
FBI, open up!
Nathan then fights his way to the surface, and we see the Chimerian battleships have made their way into San Francisco. I always really enjoyed the design of the Chimerian battleships. I always thought they looked really sharp and unique. As the battle rages above the underwater San Francisco base, a large volley of artillery is fired towards one of the battleships. It's heavily damaged and starts to limp north. Nathan then makes his way back into the base to grab vials for inhibitor treatment. As I mentioned earlier, without them, the Sentinels are doomed. Upon exiting the base, the Kraken emerges, and we're forced to fight it. The boss fight with the Kraken is rather interesting. Yes, it looks really cool, and yes, it's quite unique, but it's not quite executed the way you'd hope. The quality isn't there. Nathan then makes his way north to Oric, California. With the help of Echo Squad, Nathan is able to steal a Chimerian transport. They sneak their way onto the Chimerian battleship, and then we get to see a rather scenic explosion. Nathan then makes his way to Twin Falls, Idaho. It's here that we see that there's a recent infection with the Grims I mentioned earlier. They make their way to a defense tower, where we get to fight the Mother Spinner. They are then able to reactivate the defense towers and damage the nearby Chimerian battleships. Our heroes then make their way to Station Genesis, a Chimerian tower located in Bryce Canyon. Upon arriving, we get to see Dr. Malikov again, and I can't tell you how much I hate this character in the second game. In the third game, he's a lot more tolerable, and he's better written. In this game, he just provides dry exposition. Station Genesis is not a bad level, but it's in this level that we have to fight the Swarm boss. I felt that the Swarm boss was poorly designed. You're going to have to do a lot of trial and error before you can get anywhere. Echo Squad then makes its way to Chicago, where Dr. Malikov is able to prevent the activation of the Chimerian Tower. Unfortunately for our heroes, Daedalus is able to reactivate the tower remotely from their base in Iceland. The United States then bands together and decides to attack the Iceland base. Despite heavy casualties, the Echo Squad makes their way inside the Iceland Tower. It's here Warner and Hawthorne are both killed. Unfortunately, these characters weren't developed to the point where I felt sad that they died. It's kind of unfortunate. I mean, if they would have been in the first game, or if you would have had a better relation with them, maybe it would have been a lot more impactful, but in my experience, I just didn't feel any kind of sadness. Nathan Hale then takes on Daedalus alone, and is impaled. Luckily, Capelli is able to save him. And then all of a sudden we wake up 6 weeks later in Louisiana. When we're in the San Francisco area, they say he only has 19 hours to live. Last time I checked, 6 weeks is a little bit longer than 19 hours. Nice job, Insomniac. In the final level of Resistance 2, Blake and his team are trying to find a way to get onto the Chimerian flagship and destroy it using a nuclear bomb. It's here they make their way onto the Chimerian flagship. As our heroes try to make their way through the ship, Blake is killed. The bomb is then taken away from them. The Chimerians get their hands on the only nuclear weapon they have on board. Nathan Hale is then forced to chase down the bomb before it's pushed off the ship. As soon as Nathan Hale single-handedly defeats Daedalus, he absorbs Daedalus's power. Nathan then has to make his way off the ship as fast as humanly possible. I don't even know if humanly applies in this case. He's basically a god at this point. Every time he puts his hands up, the Chimerans around him just erupt. And as soon as Nathan gets his way back to Capelli, they both fly off the ship in the transport they had. After crash landing, Capelli makes his way out of the transport ship to see that Nathan is fully converted to a Chimeran. Capelli then apologizes, pulls out his pistol, and kills Nathan Hale.
It was an honor.
Best part of the series. To summarize, I think Resistance 2 brings a lot of good things to the table. I felt that a lot of the levels in Resistance 2 were very scenic. I never felt that the environments underperformed. They definitely tightened up the controls. I never had any complaints with how things worked from a physics point of view. I liked the plot a lot more. I found it more entertaining overall. I like how they expanded on the lore of the series. I really like the bosses in the game, with exception to the Swarm. Last but not least, one of my favorite things is that Nathan Hale dies. Of course, Resistance 2 brings a lot of things to the table that I didn't like. One of the first things I didn't like was some of the gameplay design choices. The 2 weapons, for example, just kills it for me. I can't stand it. I felt that they made the weapons worse. For example, the carbine has a smaller clip. The bullseye rifle feels way less powerful. I hate the voice acting over radio. There's no point to that being in the game.
A couple demo kits, but what good is that?
And lastly, I don't like the ammo system they put in place. When you pick up a fresh weapon, you have full ammo. It just ruins the mechanics of survival. So, to capture everything, the positives and negatives, I give Resistance 2 a D. Thank you for watching, everyone. I really appreciate you watching to the end of the video. And lastly, but most importantly, I hope you all have a great day.